So man, you can start now, no?
We can start now. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. So today I am delighted to announce that today we have a very young and talented speaker, Dr. Dibyendu Das from IJAR, Kolkata. So on behalf of Chemical Society of IJAR Trivandrum, I welcome you, Dr. Dibyendu Das, and thank you for accepting the that offer that you are willing to give a talk on your research. But before proceeding further, let me go through his CV quickly. So he did his MSc from University of Calcutta in 2005, and then he did PhD in supramolecular chemistry again from Cultivation of Science, Kolkata, under the supervision of Dr. Prashanto Das. And then he did a PhD at Emory University from 2010 to 2013 with a very good, eminent scientist, Professor David Lin. And from 2013 to 2017, he worked in INST Mohali and IJAR Tirupati, and then he joined IJAR Kolkata as an assistant professor in January 2017. From that time, he is working in IJAR Kolkata as an assistant professor. So he has published lot of very high impact papers already, and for that already he also awarded several awards. He is awarded. I will go through only few of them. So in this year 2021, he was awarded as a young scientist from the Indian Peptide Society, and in last year he was awarded as a Swarna Jayanti Fellowship from the DST. So with this, I request Dr. Dibyendu Das to deliver your talk. So his talk will be on system chemistry, how complexity emerges from chemistry. So now the floor is yours, Dibyendu.
Thank you, Showman, for this long introduction, and thank you for inviting me, Vasudev and Chemical Society. Sounds like a very interesting format. And please, the students out there, I think it's a student-driven program. So please let me know in case you have any question in between. I'd love to answer. I think you can see my screen already, right?
No,
not yet.
Not
Yeah. Okay, so this is the problem with two monitors. Now it should come, right? Okay.
Yes, it's coming.
All right. So this is what we do, systems chemistry, and I will begin a chemistry talk with a quote of a physicist on biology. So it's kind of interesting to say that how diverse is systems chemistry. So Schrödinger said, "Living matter evades the decay to equilibrium." So I will come to that quote in just a couple of minutes. It's a very interesting quote, right? A physicist talking about that, trying to define living matter, one of the most complex things to define. Okay, so this is what we do. This is what we invest. We are invested in systems chemistry. How life started 3.8 billion years ago, and took three domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. We are somewhere here, very insignificant human beings. But what exactly happened here is anybody's guess, and in all likelihood we might never know. This is a phylogenetic tree for students out there. This is how the chemistry happened. The complexity, the reaction network started happening. These were driven by energy. One of the landmark for abiotic to biotic transition is the fact that living matter can harness energy, can use energy to do work. The moment we stop using energy, we are dead. So that is a very interesting concept. We'll talk about that. Obviously, duplication is one of the important concepts of living and non-living matter. And then there is this guy, why we are talking not in your beautiful campus, in rather boring campus in contrast to yours rather. So because of this virus, which is not living, but can show Darwinian evolution under pressure, as we already see some mutant variants coming up. It cannot create its own protein, but we cannot call it living. But it's very interesting to think about that. So the point I'm making is that we are interested in creating catalysts majorly, how metabolism took part. There are certain things, not all I will be able to cover. I told the showman that for that I have to come to your campus for that to cover. But I will try to cover, I give a glimpse of the work we are doing. So what things are going on here? Chemical evolution, and then beyond that, can we create life 2.0, synthetic life? I know this sounds very tantalizing and almost science fiction, but the amount of progress systems chemistry and promise systems chemistry has shown, why not at some point we will show some material which will have remarkable traits of life, right? So it will be quite fun. Anyway, so with that I move on, and this is the small molecules we use. You all might know this. This is an ATP, a very high energy molecule, kinetically stable, thermodynamically activated molecule. What do I mean by that? I will talk about that. We use various small heterocycles. We use short peptide, short nucleic acid to mimic enzymes, very advanced enzymes. Not only the catalytic power, but the mechanism in the sense that cascade catalysis. Yes, yeah. So raise the hand. Somebody raised a hand. Yeah, sure. I think someone raised their hand, I thought. Anyway, so you can just turn on your mic and ask if you wish. So yeah, so we have, we try to mimic from promiscuity to cascade catalysis to covalent catalysis. I will talk some bits of that. And then protonucleic acid, ribosome, and this is going to be the heart of my talk, non-equilibrium structures. As I said, structures which need energy to assemble. When we add energy, they will assemble, otherwise they will crash out. So why systems chemistry? Many of you might have heard about it, and all of you must have heard about, obviously energy driven, must have heard about supramolecular chemistry, right? Supramolecular chemistry is last 6 decades has been fascinating fields. The field of supramolecular chemistry has evolved, which has given us products like various products, right? Now it's in the curriculum of almost in every level, I would say, in terms of undergrad course even. Some students, I mean, some courses are using supramolecular chemistry at that level also. So what is supramolecular chemistry? You are using these small molecules which stick to each other with various weak forces to create structures through non-covalent interactions, right? That's what we know. There could be various definitions also, and we have gotten products of supramolecular chemistry. We can use them. For example, I've taken 2 these random reviews. They are great reviews, but just for example, I'm taking nucleic acid-based nanostructures, which can be used for filtration devices, sensing, drug delivery, peptide-based nanostructures. They're all products of supramolecular chemistry. Even this remdesivir drug for coronavirus treatment, Gilead, one of the US drug giant, used cyclodextrin, this good old concept, to solubilize remdesivir. MOFs, molecular crystals, micelles are all products of supramolecular chemistry. But if you have noticed, we have written the word under equilibrium. These are all stable structures. Why not? We need stable structure for function, right? If I have to plot now, and that's where things get interesting. If I have to plot the Gibbs free energy diagram of these structures, it will be downhill. It will be stable. This will be starting from a monomer, forming some structures which are stable, or it could be kinetically trapped, depending on the barrier. How long is the barrier? How tall is the barrier? If the barrier is larger than kBt, it will be kBt Boltzmann constant and temperature. It will be stable here. Otherwise, it will roll back to equilibrium. Anyway, these structures are either kinetically trapped or thermodynamically or under equilibrium, and they are stable, and that's what they are supposed to be. We want a stable structure, right? We want a stable structure to be used for their application. We don't want something that is stable, not stable, has a life. We don't want that. We want things to be lasting for long, right? But there's a profound difference. Although we call them to be nature inspired, just because they're using weak forces like nature uses, like nucleic acid, hydrogen bonding, the pi stacks and all. But are they really mimicking living processes? That's the question. And I will come back to the quote of now Schrodinger, and living matter evates at equilibrium. The flip side of the quote, or rather the corollary of the quote, would be a steady state system in equilibrium where no work is done is inanimate. So what do I mean by that? So equilibrium is this one that I showed you earlier, which is going downhill. Non-equilibrium is non-equilibrium self-assembled system or non-equilibrium living matter. I'll give you an example of that. Is something that needs energy to self-assemble. So you have to add energy to drive them to self-assembly, and in the self-assembled state, they will dissipate energy. Dissipate energy means that a cup of coffee will, tea will dissipate energy heat, your AC outdoor unit will dissipate heat. This will dissipate energy. The energy will be given. Some energy will be used for order, and some energy will be dissipated. Entropy will be created, and that will drive the system. And then after the energy is expended, they'll come back to equilibrium. So kind of like this, we add energy like a fuel, just a fuel in your car, and just like a fuel in a car or bike, it runs out, it will come down. Non-equilibrium steady state will be, if you keep adding energy, it will keep sustaining the structure. The moment we turn off the knob, it will come down, crashing. So here, there will be a remarkable actually control of structure, and this is a function of time. In equilibrium, we don't have a function of time. Equilibrium, the classical definition is carefully mentioned in the textbook that it depends on how long you're looking at the system, right? Sometimes even the interstellar events are not in equilibrium. Equilibrium will be a merry molecular dance. All the molecules will be all will be molecules. Everything depends on how long you're looking at the system. So definition of equilibrium would be how long you're looking at the system. On that time, on the time frame, let's say a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it's not showing on an average any change. So that is one equilibrium. Here, it is on a function of time. This depends on a function of time. How? I'm adding energy to sustain this state. When the moment I'm turning off the energy, it will come down. So this is the premise of this thing, and this is how biology uses. For example, this very popular video, some of you might have seen this. The WBC is trying to chase this, most probably this foreign body, and this is driven by acting cytoskeleton proteins. These are polymers, protein polymers, which are driven by ATP, the currency of energy, right, in the human body or living systems rather. And these are this coupling, this polymerization of these proteins are coupled with this nucleoside triphosphate NTPs. Similarly, this exotic structure of microtubule. These are microtubule forming this spindle and cell division. These green filaments you see are energy driven. So this exotic structure, this remarkable control of function over time, in matter of 2 minutes, these are forming. In matter of 2 minutes, they are dissolving. These are seen across life forms as an evolutionary strategy, and you can imagine how important this is. This is only possible when you break the constraints of equilibrium. So if we can mimic these things, these structures, although somebody might think that why a chemist will want a structure to be transiently stable, right? A physicist might be interested because non-equilibrium structures should interest them. I don't know whether there are physicists in the audience or not. A biologist will be interested because this biology stuff, right? But we should be interested, of course, because this will, as one of the very popular review by Bartosz Grzybowski, you might have heard of his name, wrote that if we can harness dissipative self-assembly in chemical systems, we can redefine chemistry. We will have an acute control, acute adaptability, and temporal control of functions of materials. We are just scratching the surface. I will show you a glimpse of the functions also, what we are trying to do. Anyway, so moving on to go in detail of these structures, right? What exactly happens in the mechanistically in these structures. So if this is a movie, and if this is a snapshot now, for example, these 5 wheels, these are the 5 wheels frozen in time, just for a cartoon sake. These are the proteins, these are the building blocks. So these building blocks are driven to polymerization by this GTP. GTP is guanosine triphosphate, are kinetically stable but thermodynamically activated molecule. This will drive the polymerization. Interestingly, in the polymerized state, when the polymers are formed, as soon as forms, there is an acceleration of catalysis. There is a conformation change. We have seen, although it's a very simplistic diagram, I must say, there is a change of conformation from a bent state to a straightened state. There is an acceleration of catalysis. What catalysis? This polymer subsequently breaks GTP to GDP, and that results in disassembly. So the thing that drives the formation of the catalyst, so the substrate is driving the chemical fuel, we call it chemical fuel, drives the polymerization, just like a 2-component polymerization that is known in literature. But the polymer state subsequently breaks the GTP, the GDP, and that results in this dynamic instability. These exotic structures are formed, and that's where it is non-equilibrium, right? we are adding, the moment we stop adding GTP, these structures will not be formed. They are formed in a matter of maybe 1 minute if event, and will just fall down, right? So this is where it's going on, and we call it. So if I have to tick the check boxes, it will be accelerated catalysis from assemble state. Activation form happens from building block, and microtubules are mostly made of GTP. The point they are making is that the books, and then the reviews of this structures, that the GTP actually stabilizes finally the polymers, very high energy polymers, which are almost formed, and they are dissipating. And that's why if you have seen movies, they just, this is a testament actually. So the acceleration of catalysis happens. That is the key point here, as you can see, the point number 1. If you have to plot the rate of hydrolysis, you show like a huge enhancement after some time. So sometimes it's going like this, and suddenly there's a huge enhancement of activity, and that is a classical smoking gun proof of a substrate-driven acceleration of catalysis. And this is one of the quintessential examples of non-equilibrium structures of biology. Okay, so we were not the first, obviously, to start this, understand this field. On the similar work came out in 2015 by a group of Vanish and Inkema. They showed that, and Showman must have known, knows about this. He has written a wonderful review on this also. This is an acid, what they have used, and then they have added methylating agent, dimethyl sulfate, just an acid. Don't know about the structures. These are negatively charged. When they added the methylating agent, it rapidly formed the ester. No, obviously we know that, and it rapidly self-assembled because the charge repulsion was gone. But in self-assembled state, they had, actually the system had a very fine balance, very sweet balance, for the lack of a better word for sodium hydroxide. Very fine balance of hydroxide was there, and that resulted in hydrolysis. Although the methylation was very rapid, the hydrolysis was very slow. They used a very carefully chosen concentration of sodium hydroxide in the medium, and that resulted in a transient population of these structures. These filaments were forming and dissolving away. It's a fascinating supporting information in the movie. You can watch it for free, and you might have access, obviously, for science. You can see that these supporting information movies are stuffs really of science fiction. They're forming and baking, forming and baking. That's a transient assembly. But then we asked, is it really mimicking biology? Because biology, the non-equilibrium structures of biology, the assembled state, if you remember what I showed, was dissipating energy. The assembled state was converting the NTP. The NTP hydrolysis was coupled with cytoskeleton polymerization. The GTP to GTP conversion was done by the assembled state. In this case, there is a background, there is something else that has been used to hydrolyze the ester. So there was a very critical difference. In the subsequent year, Leonard Prince came up with a very fascinating piece of work where they have used a lipid surfactant in presence of ATP and found out that it's rapidly forming these vesicles, or vesicle-like structures. There also they used a very nice fine balance of enzymes from the beginning. They are all supposed to be close, add all your stuff, close your vial and see what happens, something like that. So they added everything together, enzymes, this lipid, the surfactants, and ATP, and then they saw that a vesicle was formed, and after some time the vesicle was dissolved. So it was transient formation of vesicle. But when we asked the question, we thought that indeed there is no dissipation of energy from the assembled state. There is a feedback. This flatted arrow we try to call it as a feedback, as we showed in the earlier slide. There's no whether it's missing, but anyway, it's a feedback. So this is like a petrol of a car finishes, you stop the car. There's a feedback there, right? Here is a feedback. The enzyme is stopping this assembly for staying alive for long. This is breaking the ATP. The ATP is broken to AMP and phosphates, and that results in stripping away of the ATP from the assembled state, and that results in disassembly. But the point is, this is not dissipating from the high energy state. In fact, Prince subsequently came up with a review, a theoretical perspective in the subsequent year, and criticized in a way both the work, saying that although they are a fascinating class of work, pioneering work, but they are not to mimic of biology, where the assembled state actually catalyzes the fuel to waste conversion. And at that point, I mean, yeah, so I will just juxtapose these two diagram for the sake of the students to understand. So this is a diagram that is just showing the petrol, the gasoline kind of a nozzle that is adding this to drive the assembly. The assembly is converting GTP to GDP, and that is coming back. In this case, in Vanish Science or in Prince Nature Chemistry, they have used in either hydroxide or enzymes to convert this. So that was the background so far in the field. We thought whether self-assembly of, let's say, small catalytic units like histidines, lysines can hold the key in terms of having an acceleration of catalysis from assembled state, and without the source or without the addition of any deactivating agent. So if you have to define this is activation, this is deactivation, this has to be very fast, this has to be pretty slow to have a population of this, and this should be autonomous. There should not be anything else. So we thought, why not use, okay, so before that, I know this slide is there. So before that, nature uses other examples also of substrate driven polymerization. This is the same thing basically. I will skip this slide. So we used, way out was, we used cooperative catalysis, we used binding pocket generation of peptides and small molecules to create a catalyst which will be driven by substrate. And when we driven by substrate, the catalyst will be generated, and the catalyst will subsequently break the substrate to come back to equilibrium. Okay, that was the idea. So what we started with, Subodhi started back in 2018, was with this molecule, very simple molecule, as you can understand, a histidine with a lipid chain. This is a cartoon of that. When we added 30 millimolar and 20% DMSO water, there was no networks. What do you mean networks? What do I mean by networks? The networks is that electron microscopy, we don't see any structures. But when we added a subset of the concentration, only 12 millimolar with 4 millimolar phenol and 4 millimolar ETC, we found rapid polymerization. I mean, in the sense that assembly, because it was gelling, it was forming a hydrogel, or rather a DMSO, 10% DMSO water containing gel, aqueous gel. But after some time, it was hydrolyzing, because the color was intensifying. You can't see from here, by the way, but it was crashing out and forming an autonomous gel. So if we mix everything together, we see a gradual gelation, and slowly the gel was forming into a solid. We did TEMs, and we found that the TEMs, SEMs, confocal microscopic IEMs, a battery of techniques we have used. We found that everywhere is showing some structures are rheometry, some structures, some material strength is increasing, CD spectroscopy is changing with time, and after some time it is coming down. So it's showing a transient change. We are claiming it to be a dissipative example of dissipative self-assembly, because the self-assembled state is hydrolyzing. Interesting point to note is here that this is the lifetime was found to be around 30 minutes, but we could see from NMR the ester peaks was forming and vanishing in less than 15 to 20 minutes. That means really a high energy structures are being accessed. So so this was very interesting to see. One of the few examples where nothing outside, one of the first example I will stick my neck out and say that, where no deactivating agent like a hydroxide or enzyme in case of Vanish and Prince respectively was used here. The system was hydrolyzing the substrate on its own, just like biology, just like non-equivalent structures of cytoskeleton proteins. We did a refueling. Refueling would mean you can fill up the tank again of the car should run again. But this was continuing for 3 times, and after that it wouldn't continue, because you can understand in a human body we have excretion systems, right? We can excrete the waste and all. But in this case, in tiny vial, we don't have that, so we could not do more than that. But anyway, the point was that we could refuel the system to access the gel multiple times. What was the reason for this activity? Reason for the activity was pretty known affair actually in biology. Again, this is called cooperative catalysis, where 2 histidines come together close to each other. As you can see, they're assembling, and one histidine acts like a nucleophile, other histidine acts like a proton donor. And this is actually to be so that one of the reviewers actually suggested this experiment, that you can do this experiment. Very classical proof. So when we check the activity, found the highest activity at 6.5, which is close to the pK of the histidine, as you might know. So that shows that this is the cooperative catalysis happening. So the point is that when substrates are driving, the histidines are coming close, and then they're breaking, they're coming back to equilibrium. So that was really fascinating to see. Subsequently, Pavel, one more student, he thought that here in this case, we are calling the EDC as the fuel, right? EDC is added as the fuel. He said that let's not use EDC, let's go the biology way and use rather an ester. So he added an ester rather than a EDC and phenol. He added directly an ester, a different ester, phenol and ester, the same histidine surfactant. And when we mix them together, we found that these are individually not forming any relation structure, but when they are mixed together, it's forming a gel. After some time, it was forming a solid. We could see rheological studies, rheometry studies, CDs, various studies to show that there is transient temporal increase of signal and they are falling down. Interestingly, we could see the formation of emergent morphology. Why do we call it emergent? These helical structures were formed, but these were never accessed when in either of the monomers or any other conditions which were promoting equilibrium. So these structures were accessed and only temporarily accessed, and after some time it was falling down. We did some cryo-EMS experiments also, especially one more tool to show that the gels were showing very nice helical structures which were only transiently stable. We did this fun experiment, and some of the people who are in self-assembly field will like it a lot, and I get a lot of questions from here actually. So what we did, this was the system that we were doing, that when we mixed them together, we found helices and this was disassembly. When we added the surfactant now, and we treated the system in a way, we kept the surfactant for sleeping, for death, for equilibrium. So I'm sitting on a chair, I'm sitting for long, and I will feel sleepy, right? So if I keep the surfactant in the cuvette or in the vial for long, let's say 12 hours, they will aggregate into some structure. These are surfactant, these are amplified, these are forming some micelles, some worm-like micelles. Then we add the substrate. At that time, it was not able to drive the self-assembly, it was not forming the gel. So we call it an equilibrium self-assembly, equilibrium non-dissipative system. Interestingly, this was not forming a gel, it was showing some catalysis. Obviously, it will show catalysis. These are structures that can break the ester, this activated ester bond, but it was not forming a gel, it was not forming the emergent morphology also. So the emergent morphology of helical structures were not forming. So this dissipative structure were accessing a new kind of morphology, which when was driven out of equilibrium. More interestingly was the fact that we could see when the system was driven out of equilibrium, it was showing higher catalytic rate than the system under equilibrium. Usually the other way around is known, other way around in the sense that we know supramolecular catalysis means more activity, supramolecular catalysis means lower, better catalytic site, chances in the building blocks. We say same concentration of building block and same concentration of the supramolecular catalyst. The supramolecular catalyst will be better active. In this case, if supramolecular catalyst is pushed away from equilibrium, the activity is even higher. So that was the point we are making. We are modeling these studies with Shundeep Kaur in IIT Bombay, and some of the faculty friends will know about him. So we are getting very interesting data on this actually. All right. So this is what the story so far is, that we have made a system which is dissipating on its own, converting fuel to waste on the assembled state. And you can see conspicuous by absence. There is nothing here which was there for hydroxide or enzyme in the other papers. All right, I will just quickly rush through this paper. This is conceptually similar. We wanted to have a better catalyst. We used peptides. This is a amyloid sequence. Again, some of you might have been exposed to this structure. We all have this in our brain. This is a long A beta 1 to 42. We took a nick of that, KLDFAE. Don't worry about the acronym. These are just the amino acid residues names, very fancy names, but these are just a 7 residue peptide, as simple as that. What we did, we took the native sequence and we mutated it with a leucine. If you see, glutamic acid E was mutated with a leucine, a hydrophobic residue. When we did one more trick, we used rather than lysine, we added histidine, and we mixed them together in terms of histidine, and this glutamic acid was made to be the parent of phenol ester, the same ester as I showed you earlier. So it will be easier to follow. So when we mix these together and these two together separately, you can imagine these will form, in a way, a kinetic trap system, depending on how long you're looking at the system. And this will form a transient self-assembly, because we expected that this will be forming anti-parallel self-assembly. Histidine will be closed and will be broken. Indeed, we found that This was the system that was the control system. This is known in literature actually, that in the human brain, some mutation can lead to hydrophobic collapse. Hydrophobic collapse means that's Ke and Kl. If 9:1 is taken, we mix them together, it forms a structure. At higher concentration, it can form a hydrogel. In this case, we are seeing the hydrogen to be formed, but it's only transient. We could see change of turbidity and change of CD with time. In this case, this is an equilibrium system, or we can call it a non-equilibrium kinetic trap system. We can define this if you are interested. We can define this in the discussion. But in this case, we are seeing the transient system to be forming. Those of you who are really doing biology or maybe know congruent dye. Congruent dye is a gold standard in terms of finding out amorite assemblies. When we added the congruent dye to this native structure, there is 16 to 22 residue. And this native structure, basically, we see a classical red shift from 520 to 527-ish lambda max. In this case, remarkably, we see a transient change. It's going up and coming down. Okay, the error bars are within this symbol, so there are very less error actually in this case. Anyway, so with that, I will say that what do I do with this system? As we should know, dissipative self-assembly is something that creating structures which are. We should ask this question also: what are the use of these systems? In fact, we are trying to use them. We are scratching the surface, I would say. So, for example, we have collaborated with Rathish Vijayaraghavan from our department, and what he did was he used these systems in various times, and then he measured the conductivity. He found that the conductivity is remarkably changing up and down with time. So we are creating these neuromorphic devices now, which is basically changing the conductivity on its own with a function of time. So that can have implication in terms of a security device. You can imagine you can have I will give you a device which will work for a particular time. After 1 hour, after 2 hours, it will not work, stop working. So it's kind of a self-destructing. Again, I will keep referring to Showman's postdoc boss, who has roughly great works in self-destructing systems. Anyway, so we could also control enzyme activity with time. This is a paper I'm rushing through. I'm sorry for the hard space. I'm hard space for time, so I have to rush through that. So we can control enzyme activity with time. We could do gate and gate concatenated and gate with small substrated, and I think we believe we have a lot of promise in diagnostics. We could also do a temporal release of a drug. We did a standard molecule inside these transient gels. We could see the model drug was releasing and then again being entrapped. So it's kind of like taking a pill. You don't have to take the pill again. It will release in its own cycle as we design it for. It will release and then stop release. Normally, a sustained release happens with gel, just like this. Yes, so control sustained release happens like this. Okay, with this, I think so. I have 10 more minutes, I guess. So I will expose you to some other parts, other aspects of systems chemistry, which is. I'll come back to that. I will come back to that phylogenetic tree. I'll talk about something about these short peptides acting like advanced enzymes. So if you take any enzymes, you can express any enzymes, you can purchase any enzyme on Sigma Aldrich. These are at least 100 amino acid long. They're very big enzymes. So how nature found those sequences? As you know, all the enzymes pack very precisely to give you a sub-nanometer, 1 nanometer size, less than 1 nanometer size binding pocket with 2-3 residues, right? Not more than that. That is just, and the rest of the structures are formed. So how nature tested out this astronomical pool of sequences to find that which will fold to create an active site is really something unresolved puzzle, and we might not be able to resolve or may not be able to solve. So I hope you understood the question. The question is that any enzyme has a long amino acid, right? Long peptide chain, like 100 amino acid. So the permutation combination will be huge in terms of which one will pack and which one will not pack. So nature had to test that, right? Which one will be packing. So we think that actually short peptide which can assemble in harsh condition and amyloid sequences. This has been the deep phylogenetic analysis have shown that amyloid have been tied to really conserved zones of the sequences, and we see that we propose that short peptide which can form these paracrystalline structures might have been the earliest protein fold. They can show some of the traits, some of the catalysis of very advanced enzyme. So there was paper by Bill DeGrado's group in UCSD. They have shown that some peptides can do hydrolysis reactions. We wanted to ask whether beyond that something can be achieved. So for that, we took to nature and we try to find out that what is the enzyme that we can actually try to do. So one of the classic enzymes, one of the very big and very popular enzyme and very useful enzyme in our human body or any extant biochemistry is aldolase. Aldolase can do CC bond manipulation in the sense that CC bond breaking and making very, very fast and can do a lot. It's extremely important for metabolism. So we wanted to mimic that, and this paper and a subsequent paper by David Lin also was very much inspirational in the sense that lysines are shown to show a retroaldol reaction. Okay, so this is a substrate. This is a very classical retroaldol reaction where acetone and aldehyde has been created. They have also interestingly shown, and that was very unique to our work, which I will show now next. Tyrosine and lysine was used. Lysine as a imine bond formation, which was resulting in this retroaldol reaction, and tyrosine had a critical role in that. So what Antora and Pavel did, they used a peptide lipid combo, which was this 4-residue peptide only. And when they assembled it in acetonyl water and water only, they found out that these homogeneous nanotubes were forming with very remarkable control of diameter. Diameter was very unique, very, very specific diameter. And these were showing this lysines were exposed. We checked it by Goldner particle studies. This is a negative charge Goldner particle adding, which shows that these lysines are indeed exposed. If I add a cationic Goldner particle, we don't see any specific binding, showing that the lysines are exposed. We add a small molecule, we see binding. That means these structures can bind also. When we added the substrate, we indeed found out that this was showing a rapid generation of this chromophore or fluorophore both. We could characterize from HPLC also. I'm rushing through this, but this is simply just showing the retroaldol reactions. We could see selection also, which is very interesting to see. This tiny peptide with very rudimentary binding pockets are showing a pretty good selectivity of various substrate. When we did a control which was having a morphologically indistinguishable structure, both were forming nanotubes, as you can imagine, lysine to arginine, having similar 9 and 11 pK, but similar charges, were not showing any activity at all. We did added the tyrosines, and we found out that tyrosine was indeed pushing the system to higher activity. When we did a control without the tyrosine hydroxide or methoxy tyrosine, we did not see the activation at all. So that showed that indeed a binding pocket is generated, and these are very good rates actually. They're very good, one of the highest rate in terms of aldolase by short peptides in this field reported. This was showing also forward aldol depending on the substrate. That was also interesting. When this is a snapshot, when we added a list of ketones like acetophenone and these ketones and added this aldol, we found that intermediate was generating HPLC. Then only selectively this product was forming. And if you are practicing organic chemistry, you know this is difficult to form actually, despite dehydrate. But we didn't see any dehydration product also. These were very selective, very simple, biocompatible or not biocompatible green catalysts, I would say, if these catalysts were showing. And finally, I will show the last part, which is just a couple of minutes I will take. As we know, lysines are important for aldolases. Lysines are important for the eyes also. Lysine does this imine bond formation reversible, and then there is a cis-trans retinal isomerization which results in signal transduction. This is called covalent catalysis in a way. There is no catalysis here. There is catalysis here. In fact, serine proteases, or what you call this catalytic triad, also uses 2-3 enzymes together to get a job done, to break a ester or amide bond. This enzyme is also very interesting. Here, one of the lysine is holding the substrate in a way you can think about like that. You mean the histidine is doing the dehydratase reaction, and then it is releasing the product. If they have arginine in this case, they were not showing much activity, very less activity. This was actually a very exciting thing to mimic for us. So what we did, in this paper by Boshaki and Ion, we added this sequence, and this sequence had a imidazole, not a histidine. If you notice, imidazole group having the same head group basically, and a lysine. These were forming the same nanotube. I will not go again in the details. They're forming, packing very nicely, form this very homogeneous nanostructures. And this is the game plan. The lysines will form, let's say we'll expose a ester with an keto group. The lysine will form an imine bond, and the ester will break by the imidazole. We'll have again a similar structure, exactly similar structure. These are forming morphologically indistinguishable nanotubes. These are arginine. As you know, arginine cannot form a nucleophilic, cannot do a nucleophilic attack, cannot form an imine. When we added that, it should activate, because the imidazole catalytic unit is still there, but it should not be as active as this one. There, we can call it covalent catalysis will be going on. That was the hypothesis. We indeed found the highest activity with lysine imidazole sequences, but when we did the arginine one, the activity was substantially lower. So it was very exciting to see a very advanced feature of covalent catalysis of 2 amino acid joining hands. I would say 3 amino acid here, because the fluid is also important. The fluid is made of leucine in this case, because it's an anti-parallel. So this, anyway, we did one truncation, one carbon removed. We removed it to ornithine. Ornithine is basically a cousin of lysine, a shorter cousin of lysine. So it has exactly the same structure, but 1 carbon less. We expected that the surface area coverage will be lesser. You can see my finger. It is, the degrees of freedom will be lower. The structure of surface area will be lesser. Lower activity. Indeed, the lower we found lower activity. So that was the story. So this is the group. So this work was done by Ion, Pavel, Shubhajit, Antara. These 4 people have done the work I've shown, and we are supported by DST Animation Inspire Shona Award and co-research grant. And this is the group meeting these days still. And in case you are interested in systems chemistry, you can read this meeting report, and there are plenty of reviews. We had this meeting last year. We are having one more meeting. I will do a quick advertisement for the students out there. This is free to attend. Either Kolkata along with UCLA, Munich, and Kani and other institutes are doing this. I would expect to be fascinating event, and you can all join in by registering there this event. Okay. With this, I close. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dibyendu, for giving us this insightful and detailed lecture on a very recent trends in supramolecular chemistry. I hope there are definitely some.
So yeah. So yeah, you were saying something. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, now it is fine.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I don't know. So my audio was turned off. Unfortunately, anybody asked
No,
question?
no.
Okay. Okay.
Audio was fine. So thank you, Dibyendu, for giving us this insightful lecture and of course details on the very recent trends in supramolecular chemistry. As of all of you understand that this is a very recent topic, and so I hope there will be maybe some questions. So if you have questions, you can ask directly Dibyendu, and then we will see. So if you have anybody have question, please.
Sir, this is Aarti.
Hello.
Can I go ahead with the question?
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, so this out of equilibrium intermediates, are they same as kinetically trapped intermediates?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So kinetically trapped would be anything not in equilibrium is non-equilibrium. Okay. So even the journey towards equilibrium is non-equilibrium. The definition has to be safe. So I will go to the diagram. The kinetically trapped system would be this one, right? This one is a kinetically trapped system.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is a kinetically trapped system in the sense that it is away from equilibrium, but this lifetime will be determined by the height of this barrier. If the barrier is small, it's called metastable state. Again, these are jargons. The point is that to answer a question, these are non-equilibrium. Definitely, we can call them if I follow the textbook. But these are not dissipative system, Aarti. Dissipative is something that is, dissipative is something that is not in equilibrium, but is dissipating energy. It's consuming energy to stay in that state here, if you can follow the cursor, okay? This state, and that is called non-equilibrium dissipative system. You see that we have written that in. Okay.
Okay.
Great question.
Another question I have with regard to the conductivity measurements.
Yeah.
Did you do it on the dry sample or is it on the wet sample with the
So
salt?
so this is what was done actually by my collaborator. So it was done in a dry sample actually.
Okay.
Okay. So it was done in a dry sample. We did a triplicate of measurements on various time dependent dry sample. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anybody more? Okay, maybe I will ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
Oh, Veera, you want to ask? Then you go.
Yes. I am organic chemist.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah. So you showed. Can you hear me? Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah, the voice is not very clear. Yeah.
Okay. So in the early part of your talk, you were showing that the methylation is in DMS. Right? You are doing the methylation of carboxylate. And in early 6 or 7.
So,
Veera, your voice was not clear. Even I cannot.
Yeah. Can you hear now?
Yes, I can hear now.
Yeah. So in the early of your talk, I see that you are doing methylation of carboxylate salt with the DMS.
Yeah. So that was not our talk, Veera. That was that was not our word basically. Yes. Carry on.
Okay. So I guess you have a doubt like instead of DMS, can you use any other methylating agent and see the same trend?
Yes, so they have done that. I remember they have done that. The same group published a previous paper, and now the first author is starting their own. Your Bukoven has. Yeah, so to answer your question, they have done that. They have done other methylating agent also.
Okay, because I'm a little bit like how they generate this OH minus if you use some other methylating agent. This is my concern.
So that is a question. That is something that is really. So if you have to see this paper, I must say, Veera, because the hydroxide will short circuit, right? The hydroxide will react with methylated sulfate, and it will just crash out. I mean, it will break the methylating agent. So I don't know how they did it. So they have done at least 40 pages of supporting information to justify that. I think Soumen knows. So
I think the concentration also matters. The exact concentration.
No. What I understand that in case of DMS, under the reaction conditions, you can generate some kind of sodium hydroxide, whatever it is. But no, it's not like that.
No.
They are using sodium hydroxide in the medium.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so maybe I did not get. So even if you add sodium hydroxide, Soumen, this will react with methyl sulfate very fast, right? That's what I would expect. But
yes.
Yeah. So no, the hydroxide is not generating. The hydroxide is there from beginning.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Basically, first one basically a little bit more philosophical. How far we are up to now to create life or artificial life, or let's say let us put this question in another way: that what are the important criteria you think that will basically define a life? According to you, maybe this will be useful for the students.
Right. So I think one of the important most criteria to define life would be replication, and I think basically showing evolution, right? Replication and then selection from a pool of population. That will be defining life, but all has to come together as we know, right? It has to have a metabolic system, otherwise virus will be living. Virus is not living. It has to have a system of continuously using energy. So these are the questions that we are all asking.
Yes.
All have to come together. Now we have independent systems showing that.
Yes.
One system showing is not there at all, and that's why it took so many years, 1 billion years, to have one first life form to come, right?
Yes.
We know it is how many? Yeah, maybe 7 billion years to take one life form to come. Yes.
Okay.
Great question.
And another question. This is basically from point of view of research. So all of this dissipative structure, if you see the literature, most of them are reported on polymer or basically or oligomeric cases. But if you see discrete supramolecular architecture, this is not reported. I think only one case is reported from the Nitschke group, that where they make like I think cage,
Right.
out of equilibrium cage. So what is your view on this?
So that is actually expected, right, Shomen? The reason is that we are trying to make a polymer to be useful. If I want to make a discrete molecule, how it will be more useful or less useful, if you think about it. One more example is there by Ziprin-Otto's group in 2014. There was an chemie where they have shown a driven self-assembly of a formation of a cage complex, actually.
Yes,
One of the best example, I would say. But having said that, if you don't make a polymer, only the polymer will do work, like a biology. Muscle movement is also actin work, right? So muscle movement is also ATP. Unless you do a polymer, you cannot do a work. So that was the reason. But yeah, I agree. These are very, very less reports.
Very less reports.
Yeah.
Maybe Gokul has some question. Gokul, you raise your hand or what? I do not.
I think Joydev, or somebody,
Okay, please go ahead if somebody has any question. I think some hands I can see, but I don't know whether they have questions or not. Okay, if there are no further questions.
No, I have the question. Okay.
Oh, you have the question. Okay, please.
Okay, I forgot to turn on the microphone.
Okay.
So, very nice talk. I really liked it. So, how do you make sure that you retain the structure when you dry? Because many of the characterization you do in dry state, right?
Yeah, many of the, but we do confocal. We did a live imaging like this, actually. We don't start incorporating that, actually. So that we have done confocal imaging, live imaging. We see structures to be formed and breaking. We have done cryo-EMs also. Cryo-EMs also, to be fair, is not giving the justice. But yeah, I totally see your point. So that's why reason I mentioned that this is just example, but I can show you images, and now our papers have that confocal microscopy images of liquid samples.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more question from anybody? Okay, if not, let us thank Dr. Dibyendu Das from our side, from the Chemical Society of IJR Trivandrum, for giving us this very nice presentation on very recent topics. We thank you, and also we hope that you will come at some point here for in person to give your presentation. That will be very much appreciated, probably. Okay, I think we will close here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Bye bye. Yeah.
Bye bye.